Cool. That one's good. And making back to Chrome. Indeed. So, getting everything situated and whatnot. So if you're watching this and you cannot hear me, please let me know. I don't want to get into stuff and then nobody can hear me, right? All right, let me make sure that I'm live on Facebook and YouTube. Looks like I'm good over there. Cool. Make sure that I can see myself. Request jump desktop site. Cool. Awesome sauce. All right. Let me just share this joint to my personal page real quick, and then we will get started. Sure. Actually, probably just do it from my phone. Yeah, technology is still it's still giving me some challenges. Starting to feel old, I guess. But yeah, welcome everybody to this live talk. It's supposed to be Monica and I, but Monica was feeding the baby and she's kind of sleeping and whatnot right now. So, you know, she may end up popping up in the video later, but if not, that's where she is. You might see her commenting and stuff, but we'll see. Here we go. So let me just share it to my personal page. Okay, so for those of you who don't know who I am, my name is Billy. And myself, alongside my wife, Monica Kay, we are the co-directors of a dance company called Kizomba Harmony, which is based in Houston, Texas, although our community and platform is now international. But we're based in Houston, Texas. And the reason that I'm making this video is there have been a lot of conversations in the dance community and outside the dance community about racism, inclusion, sexism, a lot of things that are plaguing our community. And whether it's because of COVID and the fact that we now have more time to, I guess, talk about things, or, you know, the rise of cancel culture or whatever, a lot of people are talking about things that they haven't really talked about much before. But some things we've talked about over and over again. And specifically in the dance community, there's been a lot of talk about the lack of inclusion for certain demographics. Black women being one that's really being talked about right now, both social dancing wise and professional opportunities wise. And so I'm going to talk about that. And the reason I'm going to talk about this, you know, we've been for many years now advocates of building an inclusive community. And, you know, a few years ago, this same topic of conversation came up, and there were discussions and people talked about it. But a lot of the people who were talking then were having the same conversations now. And I'm not saying that it's a waste of time to talk about things, but this is usually the kind of thing that happens. People say, okay, what's going on? You solicit feedback, and then nothing happens, right? Just like with a lot of politicians, when there's an issue, what happens? It's that I'm going to put together a task force and we're going to do some stuff, right? It's basically a kick the can down the street kind of thing. And in my case, I think that although having discussions is important, the only way to really fix these issues of inclusion is to create spaces that are truly inclusive. And that's not just being inclusive to one demographic, that's to everybody. So before I get into it, so the purpose of this video is going to be how we built our community to be as inclusive as it is. I'm going to talk about what an inclusive community is and what it's not. And I'm going to talk about what you can do to help build or be a part of an inclusive community. And it'll be depending on, you know, if you're an organizer, artist, or someone in a position of relative influence, there are some things you can do extra that people who are just social dancers can't do. But even if you're just a social dancer, and I say just a social dancer, not to denigrate you, but what I'm saying is no matter whether you have a title or whatever your title or job is, you can be a leader just by taking a stand on something. So there's a lot that you can do, even if you don't have one of these positions of relative influence. And I'm talking about that. So first thing, what do I mean when I talk about an inclusive community? Because again, right now, and maybe it's Black Lives Matter combined with COVID, combined with a lot of people just being frustrated about a lot of things that are going on in our society, racism, rape culture, homophobia, a lot of things. A lot of people are getting fed up, and cancel culture is about to really take a it's going through the roof, right? A lot of people are being canceled right now and being held accountable. Because of that, a lot of people who are in positions of influence, organizers and whatnot, are going to start using the word inclusion and inclusive a lot, because it's kind of like, it's a trigger word, a term of art, right? People are going to start using these words to make themselves seem more inclusive because they don't want to be canceled, right? And a lot of this, I'd be lying if I said that for some people out here speaking about all of these social justice issues, I'd be lying if I said that opportunism wasn't a motivating factor in some of the people doing this, right? Because I have to be honest. But because of this fear of cancel culture, a lot of people are going to be start using these terms. So I'm going to tell you what I mean so that you can understand what I'm saying in the rest of the video. Okay. An inclusive community is a community where everybody feels welcome. And when I say everybody, I'm going to add the caveat, everybody except for toxic people. And that's because, at least the way we do it, we don't want to be inclusive to toxic people. In fact, you can't really have an inclusive community where you have a critical mass of toxic people or where you have toxic people in positions of influence. You can't. And I talk a lot about toxicity, and a lot of people are probably wondering, what am I talking about? Why is he always saying toxicity? Basically, toxicity is harmful energy or behavior. Example, people who are really disrespectful, right? Look online and you'll see a lot of people who are really disrespectful. They can't have debates or disagreements with people without making it personal. They're always talking trash about people. People like this. This is toxic. And I'm going to talk a lot about enablement culture and things like this because these are things that are barriers to really building an inclusive community. So you've got people who are disrespectful, people who harm others, right? Obviously, people who physically harm others, but also predators, sexual predators, people who sexually harass and assault people. This is also toxic. People who are dishonorable, disreputable, people who do shady things, who try to hurt each other, stab each other in the back, and then just people who are just unpleasant. And you all know people in your spheres of influence who are like this. They walk into a room and just suck the energy out of a room. And I'm not just talking about people who are critical, because again, I will say, as someone who's critical, if you are someone who I've criticized, you may think I'm toxic, right? But I'm toxic in the way that antibiotics and soap are toxic. If you're dirty or diseased, then yes, I'm going to be toxic to you. And anyone who is actually a good person and wants to build an inclusive community, you need to become toxic to toxic people as well. And we'll talk more about that in a second, because that's really the only way to make this thing work. So basically, toxic people are people who are harmful, okay? And that's what I mean. So for us, anyone who isn't toxic, we want to make them feel welcome. So what does that mean? That means that no matter what your race, gender, orientation, preferences, religion, anyone and everyone who isn't toxic should feel comfortable coming into your spaces, into your communities. Everybody should be able to get dances, right? If a certain demographic isn't getting any dances all night, that's not an inclusive environment, right? It's not. If people who have a certain orientation, right? If your space isn't friendly to LGBT folks, right? And that's something that's not often talked about a lot in dance, but there's a whole group of people and they dance too, right? If they're not comfortable coming to your spaces and dancing and intermingling with people. And that's something a lot of people don't talk about, because there is a lot of homophobia in some of these dance spaces, right? And that's something that's not talked about, but it's important. Rape culture. Any community that enables entrenched rape culture is not inclusive, right? Because again, you have people who've been victimized, harassed, raped, assaulted, right? When people look the other way or blame victims or are not friendly or empathetic to people who've been survivors of sexual assault, that's not inclusive, because now victims and survivors of sexual assault are not included, right? They don't feel welcome. They're afraid. They don't trust these communities and spaces because rape culture is on the rise and people don't feel protected or safe. This is not inclusive, okay? So when I talk about inclusive communities, this is what I mean. Having a little sip of whiskey. Okay. So, the first thing I'm going to talk about is what you can do to build or be a part of these communities. And the first thing is, it doesn't matter whether you're a social dancer, teacher, organizer. You have to ask yourself, do you really want to be a part of an inclusive community? And, and I'm going to talk a little bit about this because this is really important. Do you really want to be a part of an inclusive community? Because there are a lot of people out there that don't, right? They just want to be in a position of influence, right? And a lot of people out here who are fighting for these social justice issues, conveniently enough, often, if you're fighting to get opportunities for a certain demographic, you happen to be in that demographic, right? There's a little bit of self-promotion there, isn't there, right? There is. So do you really want to be a part of an inclusive community, or do you want to be a part of a community where you, your friends, people who look like you, or people who are in your group are in the positions of influence? If that's what you want, then what you want isn't an inclusive community, is a clique. If you are a cliquish person and you're comfortable in the cliquish environment, you're not going to be able to create an inclusive environment. And the reason is because it starts with the people in the community, especially people in positions of influence who set the example. If you don't have those people setting that example, you cannot build an inclusive community. You can say inclusive, you can say you're inclusive, you can do performative things like post things on social media, but you can only do it for so long, right? And so the first point is, you can't build or be a part of an inclusive community if you don't authentically desire to be a part of an inclusive community. And what that means is you have to be in yourself an inclusive person. So if you're not a welcoming, friendly person yourself, how can you build an inclusive environment? And this is something that everybody watching this needs to think about. If you are a cliquish person and you feel most comfortable in cliques, and I say this because a lot of the dance scene is cliquish, and there are people who don't like being called cliquish, but they are cliquish. And what the cliquish vibe ends up leading to, things like toxic enablement, right? You look the other way when your friends do something wrong, but then you want to criticize other people who are doing things wrong, and then you clamor for respect when you over here enabling people who are disrespecting others, as long as they're not disrespecting you, right? This toxic enablement syndrome, or like maybe I made up a new thing, toxic enablement syndrome, it's led to all sorts of harm and mediocrity. So if that's where you feel comfortable, you can't do it. You cannot create an inclusive environment if you yourself are not an inclusive person. For Monica and I, my wife Monica, we're co-directors of Houston Harmony. We're welcoming, inclusive people. That's our personality. So when you go to our events, it's easy to see that, because I always say that an event is a direct reflection of the organizer, right? Direct reflection of the organizer. So if the organizer of an event doesn't believe in or practice a certain ideal, you're not going to get that in the community, unless everybody else in the community has that ideal. But then usually if everybody else did, then they wouldn't be in a position of influence, would they? They'd be pushed out in favor of people who actually have the proper, principles, right? So yeah, ask yourself, what do you really want, right? If you just want to feel important yourself, you and your friends, that's not inclusive, right? Think about that. A lot of people are saying, I want to be included, I want this, I want that. Really, what they just want is more opportunities and influence for themselves. And they're not really interested or worried about anybody else. That's not inclusion. That's just opportunism. And in the dance community, opportunism is probably the most dangerous and toxic thing, not because of what it is in itself, but because opportunism often eclipses empathy, principle, integrity. It eclipses everything. People are willing to look the other way if it, look the other way when it benefits them, right? And I'll talk about that more on the back end. But these are questions that you really have to ask yourself, because building an inclusive community is not something that you can do overnight. It's taken us years to do it. And it's going to take a lot of hard work, sacrifice. You're going to make people mad. You're going to piss people off. You're going to be ostracized from certain groups when you actually start setting standards. So if you're not willing to do that, you can't build an inclusive community. And so for the dancers who are like, but I want to be a part of an inclusive community, what can I do? Well, I'll talk about that in just a second. So the first thing, ask yourself, do you really want to be a part of an inclusive community? Are you willing to do what it takes to build said community? If you are, cool. If not, well, if you're just trying to avoid being canceled, well, I tell you, you're not going to be able to fake the funk. And people are starting to wake up and be more discerning about where they invest, right? So either change your values, which is not so easy, or, well, maybe look for something else to do. So if you've done some soul searching, you're like, I do want to be a part of a community where everybody feels inclusive, what can I do? Okay. And this also is going to be the same for social dancers and organizer, artists, whatever. You have to be the example. And I say this because I know I often say that it starts with people in positions of leadership, and it does. But I don't want to leave out the people who are not in the positions of leadership or influence and make them feel like they can't do anything. Because you can. Even if you're not in a position of influence or leadership now, there's a lot that you can do by setting an example, taking a stand for something, and therein you become a leader, right? So I want to give a shout out to my man Julius out of Dallas. Julian out of Dallas, because he's been starting some of these conversations that I've been talking about, working hard to hold especially black men in Texas accountable, looking out for black women, right? Because that is, black women is their demographic who's definitely been overlooked in a lot of different ways. And I've talked about this on videos before. This is nothing new to us, but this is something important. And I want to give him a shout out, Julian, because it's not easy to take a stand on stuff, right? When you speak out, you sometimes become a target. You start to make people feel threatened, and it's not easy. So I want to give him a shout out. And part of what I'm going to be doing, as part of his initiative, is I'm going to create a questionnaire for people who feel, and one is going to be for black women and one is just going to be for all women. It's going to be, how do you feel ostracized or left out, and then things that we can do to help. In our community specifically, it's not an issue, but I'll say this again, every community has things they can work on. We're not perfect either. We have built an inclusive community, but there's always more things that can be done. So I'm going to do this. And the other thing I'm going to do is kind of like what I just talked about in the first point, that do you really want to be a part of an inclusive community? It requires a lot of self-reflection. So I'm going to write some questions that we have used to do some self-reflection, and things that you can do, to the question that you can ask yourself to make sure that you're on track with what you say you want, right? So if you do want to be a part of an inclusive community, these are things you can ask yourself to make sure that your actions align with your words, right? Yeah. So shout out to Julian, just wanted to say that. So the example that you set, if you yourself are someone and you go to a party, you dance with the same people, right? And this is a problem, and I'm going to talk about Kizomba, but also in every dance community and also in society. But yeah, we're going to talk about dance community right now. If you are someone who only dances with the hot young things, if you're someone who only dances with people who are advanced, basically people who are going to make you look good or give you something that you want, you're not inclusive. You can't build an inclusive community when you yourself don't practice inclusion in your social dancing choices, right? And and I guess as a part of this, I have to talk a little bit about privilege, okay? Because it's a little bit different. I'm going to speak about Kizomba because privilege in the Kizomba community is a little bit different from privilege at large. In our international society, black people, and particularly black men, when it comes to systemic racism, are at a huge disadvantage, right? Black Lives Matter is all because, and particularly black men, but I'm not going to forget all the black women like Miss Breonna, who've been gunned down and killed, innocent people who've been killed with no justice. But often, especially, in the heat of things, it's been black men being killed by police and things like that. In the Kizomba community, it's a little bit different. The most privileged demographic in the Kizomba community is black men. And I say black men, not black women, black men. And it kind of goes like this: black, African, Palop. Palops are the Portuguese-speaking Africans, like Angolans, Mozambique, Guinea-Bissau, Sao Tome Principe, and Cabo Verde. They're Palops. These are the people who are most privileged in the Kizomba community. Why? Because, well, especially in the Kizomba Semba community, on the urban kids community, it's still there's still a privileged group. The creator of Urban Kids is African, and a lot of the guys who are considered the best dancers, the ones who are most sought out on the dance floor, are black men, right? So if you're part of this privileged group, you can often get away with things. And this is where I talk about this toxic enablement syndrome, where especially in the Kizomba Semba side, you have Palops, or Africans. If they engage in bad behavior, a lot of people in their spheres of influence will look the other way. That's why to this day we have accused rapists, predators, disrespectful trolls, and all kinds of toxic trash still being enabled and supported right now. And that's a big reason why, right? So to understand how to make a community feel inclusive, you have to understand privilege. Now, who is the least privileged demographic in Kizomba? Black women. Interesting, right? Black men are the most privileged, and black women are the least privileged, the least desired. And when I'm talking about dance-wise, right? So when you go to a social dance or whatever, the four demographics who tend to be the most overlooked social dance-wise are darker, older, bigger, and less experienced dancers, right? So if you are a dark-skinned, bigger, older, less experienced dancer, it's more difficult for you to get dances. And I'm talking about in spaces that are not inclusive. In an inclusive space, everybody dances. But most spaces are not inclusive right now, right? So you often have, on the social dancing side, the people in these demographics, which is usually black women. And even within black women, there's a colorism scale as well. Often and we'll talk about the professional side, often when you see black women being hired, it tends to be lighter skinned women. And I'm talking about in the whole dance scene right now. In Kizomba, it's a little bit different because there are so many black people in Kizomba that it's a little bit different, but there's still a lot of issues. But it's not quite as bad racism-wise in Kizomba as it is in some of the other things, because of the simple fact that there are so many black people in positions of influence that it's kind of easy to be on side of Black Lives Matter in Kizomba. You're going against the grain if you're not for Black Lives Matter. Hey, Soraya, how you doing? And yeah, as I'm talking or whatever, feel free, if you have questions or comments that are respectful, feel free to add on. I'm happy to talk with you guys and engage. So on the social dance floor, in most dance floors, black women, darker women, especially the darker ones, women who are bigger, older, and who are less experienced, like beginners. These are the women who generally don't get asked to dance. So if you're someone who wants to create an inclusive community, whether you are a social dancer or whether you're in a position of relative authority or influence, this is something you need to look at. So you go to your average social, right? You have your dance floor, you have your DJ. A lot of the times, the ladies who are not dancing are either sitting down or standing around the circumference of the dance floor, right? The ones who are hopeful tend to be standing around the edge of the dance floor. And those who are, I guess, like, man, whatever, I'm tired of waiting, will sit down at even sometimes against the wall, right? So what I do and what Monica does, we go and that's where we look to dance. We pay attention, particularly in our events, but we tend to do this wherever we go, but particularly in our events. And that's the one thing that's going to be different for organizers versus social dancers. If you are an organizer, you absolutely need to be doing this. And if you're not, you don't deserve to be supported. And I'll talk about that in the end though. Walk around and look to see who's not dancing. Now again, like I said in the beginning, if you don't really want to be a part of an inclusive community, if you just want to be like the cool kid, and I say that I know there's some people in the Kizomba community who have that as a marketing term. I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about if you want to be a cool kid, like you want to be a part of the cool crowd and just feel like a VIP, well, you're not going to be able to build an inclusive space, right? When I first started talking about this years ago, I got a lot of pushback from people who were like, well, I'm grown. I should be able to dance with who I want. You can't tell me who to dance with. Fair enough. I can't. But if that's how you feel, you're not the core of what we're trying to build. My focus is not on having you be a part of our community. I'm not going to say you can't come, but that's not my focus, right? My focus is building a core of people who do feel like that, who do like to dance with everybody, and then that's what we build our community around, right? That's important. That's very important. But a lot of people, they don't want that. They want to dance with the hot young things. They want to dance with the women they think they're going to smash, or the women that they are smashing, or the women they hope to smash, the women that are going to make them look good. In certain segments of the dance community, there seems to be a high priority on videoing social dancing. And a lot of people are, and this is something especially for artists, they're more concerned with putting out cool dance videos than actually teaching or doing anything like that. It's all about looking cool. So if all you care about really is looking cool or smashing, then you're going to be very... See, Marshan, how you doing? You're going to be super picky about who you dance with, right? And that's not a good look, right? So if that's how you feel, you're a grown-up, I can't tell you what to do, but you can't then turn around and start talking about inclusion because you're a part of the problem, right? And that's why I say this is not something that you can fake. It has to be genuine. It has to be genuine. Otherwise, it's just performative and people are going to see through it. Even if it takes a year, they're going to see through it. Because if you're in a space that isn't inclusive, I guarantee you it's because the organizers or the leaders in that community have not made it a priority. If you see an inclusive space, the organizers and leaders are inclusive. If you see a space that isn't inclusive, it's because the leaders and people in positions of influence have not set that example. And that is definitely going to ruffle some feathers, but it's the God's honest truth, and there's nothing I've seen that can refute what I just said. That being said, even if the leaders in your community are not inclusive, you as a social dancer can be inclusive in what you do. In so doing, you are now the leader, right? It doesn't matter if you're an instructor or not. You're now a leader in someone in a position of influence because of the example you set. And part of what I want with this message is to be empowering. Oh, did something happen with the video? Did it? Huh. What's going on here? On my thing, it stopped. Is it? Uh-oh. Is it? What's going on? I think I had a bug. Okay. I'm going to stop and start real quick so we'll continue. Okay, it seems like I'm stuck. Okay. So yeah, I'm gonna just turn this off real quick, and then I'll just go ahead and restart it. Yeah. Sorry about that, guys. Going live with these things, sometimes these things happen. It's not in my, it's nothing I can do about it. So give me a sec. Okay. I think we should be okay now. I think. I think I should be okay now. Am I still? Am I good now? Still stuck? Okay, cool. Looks okay on YouTube. Eh, what a pain. Okay. Still? All right. So on Facebook, I'm going to restart and come back on. On YouTube, it's still going. Weird. Okay. So weird. Okay. Okay. Hopefully, I should be back on bet. I should be back on now, I hope. Let's see. It's okay? Okay, beautiful. Okay. Yeah, so like I always say when I go live, I can't promise that there won't be any technical difficulties because, well, there's nothing I can do about that, but I'll be back. So, but at the end of this, I will. What? What's going on? Oh boy. Waiting for live video. Oh, what a pain. All right, let's see. Okay. Okay, I see myself now. Yeah, I got caught up. I couldn't see myself. Okay, beautiful. All right, bet. Welcome back. Part 2. So when I'm done with this, I'm gonna post one long full video of the whole thing that won't be live, so that it'll be easy to see everything. So stay on the lookout for that. Okay. What? It keeps saying that a live video has ended, but then, yeah, thing keeps messing with me. Okay, cool. Here we go. Let me share this to my page again, and then we'll get started once more. Yeah, because it's like, it's telling me one thing, doing another. Yeah, okay, there we go. So, okay, cool. I see myself. Jeez. Technology, guys. I used to be like, when I was younger, I was like a serious techie, man. And now, I feel like I'm falling behind the times. Okay, here you go. Okay, back. So yeah, again, when I'm done with this, I'm gonna re-edit and make and cut out all these blips and stuff, and it'll be one regular video. Okay. I was just talking about the different levels of privilege. How in Kizomba specifically, men who are Palop, African, Black tend to have the most privilege, and some of them use that privilege to get away with bad behavior. And on the other end of the spectrum, you have black women, particularly darker women, who tend to have the least privilege. Okay, I was talking about how in social dancing, everywhere, not just Kizomba, it tends to be darker, older, bigger, less experienced dancers who don't get dances as much. So if you are someone who doesn't dance with those demographics, well, then you're part of the problem. There's something you need to do. What we do in our practice is we go around the outside of the dance floor. First, we pay attention, and especially at our events, but also at events we go to, we tend to naturally do this most of the time. We tend to go around, we look and see who's not dancing, and we dance with them. If you're someone who doesn't want to do this, and I said before I had some technical glitches, when I first started talking about this, because this is stuff I've been talking about for years. I've been talking about dancing with everybody probably since 2012, right? And when I first started talking about this stuff, a lot of people were a little butthurt about it, right? I'm grown. You can't tell me what to do. I dance with who, I can dance with who I want to dance with. And that's true. But if you're someone who's trying to build an inclusive community, you can't build an inclusive community around people like that. Not to say that you should ostracize them and tell them they can't come. No, but you can't have a core of an inclusive community be like that, because that's not an inclusive person. That is an opportunistic, selfish person. Doesn't necessarily make them bad or evil, but it's not inclusive. Okay, so if inclusivity is what you want, you got to focus on people who naturally like to dance with everybody, right? And that's good for a lot of reasons. One of the reasons that that's a beautiful thing is because often, now, and I'm not talking about the people who are just trying to smash, because that's a whole different thing. But if you're trying to look for who the best dancers are, often the best dancers are not the ones who are the hot young things. Often, it's the younger ladies, the older ladies. Or did I freeze again? Did I freeze again? Lord of mercy. It seems okay on YouTube. It seems to be on Facebook where we're having trouble. What is going on, man? Trying to get Facebook to work. Wait. Oh, interesting. It seemed like I had 2 live videos going on. Facebook is so weird, man. Okay. If you're on YouTube, sorry. Trying to get Facebook to work. Okay, now it's popped up again. Okay, now I see myself on this one. This is crazy, guys. I've never had this many issues on a damn live before. Okay. Derek Wright. Okay, cool. Yeah, at the end, if this isn't working, I'll share it. Oh, yeah, you're right, Derek Wright. I'm going to share the YouTube link in the video, in the thingamajiggy. Yeah, you're right. Let me do that. Yeah, this is the pain in the ass. I think Facebook is actually just having some issues. It's Facebook. So let me just add on the comment. It doesn't work on YouTube? Ain't that a mother son of... Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to shut everything down, and then I'm going to come back. Maybe there is a glitch somewhere, okay? So I'm going to shut everything down, wait a minute, and then come back. I'll recap what I talked about, and then I'll finish. That seems to be the only way because I don't know what's going on with this thing right now. It's crazy. Okay. So yeah, I'm going to shut everything down and then come back. Sorry for all the glitches. You know, it is what it is. All right. See you in a second.